Hi, this is Jenny. I am here today. Oh my gosh. I think I have a thing going off. All right, hopefully it goes away. Anyways, geez, that's loud. Of course, no figure. All right, hold on. Oh my god, can you grab that? Jesus. Sorry, technical difficulties. Hold on. He's back in. For some reason, I have an 8:30 p.m. alarm that keeps going off for Chick-fil-A. Anyhow, hi, this is Jenny. I'm with Crime Crashers, and I am here tonight to uh, bring up some new topics or new information that we've had on the Julie Ferguson case since we first started this. I think the last time it's been a couple months. We've been kind of laying low, um, but that doesn't mean there hasn't been progress and conversations and things that we are hoping if we share might remind somebody of some details. And it may or may not be important. That's part of the problem. We don't know what is or isn't important. But we have some varying information that it doesn't, not everybody has the same information. So we can't say that anything that we're sharing is, you know, 100% valid and true. We're talking about long memories. One or two people may or may not be reliable sources, and I'll mention that as I go through. But tonight, I'm hoping if you're there that you take the time to chat, say hello, because I have no idea who's watching. I'm going to just send in a little message and say hi. So feel free to communicate with me and chime in as I go through this. And so I'm going to go ahead and add my little presentation. I'm going to do it this way. So this is episode number 8. I can't believe we've done 8 of these, but we really have gained some momentum from doing these, and your participation is important. If you want to share this event right now to your friends and have them join in. I know Facebook has a lot of people who knew Julie. It's a very active conversation, but you can also watch from YouTube. Hi, Benjamin. So I kind of talked about it. Oh, hi, Abigail. She says her husband is Julie's cousin. I'm assuming Benjamin's your husband by the last name, but thank you very much for chiming in. I'm doing this alone. It always makes me a little nervous, and but here we go. I called this the story of a girl murdered, and I think that this, a little bit the story of the time leading up to the last episode. We wanted to know more details, and I'm happy to say that we do have some more details on how she was spending her time. And so I'm going to go through that with this. So there's my little introductory slide. I first want to take a moment to focus on the fact that there is a Facebook page, Justice for Julie. There is a web page, and it's sorry, can't see the little thing on because it's in the way here, but that information is on there. And on the Justice for Julie webpage, there's all the articles from back then to present that are listed in there. You can see a lot more details. You'll see the inconsistencies. One of the things that we first did when we started this was go back through all the inconsistencies and issues, information that wasn't shared effectively at the time. Maybe at the time they just didn't have the zoom out moment to pull it all together and see that some pieces of the puzzle might have been vital to share. So we'll get into some of that as we go. One of the things that I learned a lot about through all of this, Julie's home life. I say home life, but I don't just mean at home. Um, sorry. She was an only child. Her mom was out a lot and she would get rides from friends a lot. And she had her own phone line. She was a good student at school. She was very well liked by everybody who, talked to her. She wasn't the kind of person that was really causing any trouble to anyone on a personal level. And as far as we know, that um, she basically, I'm gonna have to do it this way because I cannot see my own screen very well. Okay, so as an only child with her mom gone a lot, she got rides from friends a lot. I mean, there's so many people who are like, oh yeah, I used to give Julie rides here. Oh, I got gave rides there. She could walk to school. I'm sure at night that was not a normal thing for her to walk home, and so getting a ride was very normal for her. And that's why when her friends arrived and she wasn't there, they were concerned because she wouldn't have just walked off typically. Um, so the the nice thing about Julie is she did have a job. She was reliable, according to one of her managers at the time. So she was living a pretty good life in terms of doing all the right things. And she also had a little bit of a party life too. We know that there were known resources for drug dealing in her court, and she would have been acquainted with some of those people. We know that she was able to obtain weed, and that was something that we've talked about in previous podcasts. So she was doing some stuff that was maybe a little bit more, off the perfect good girl rails, but I think all of us can agree a lot of us did that kind of stuff. And we've talked about that before. So I just wanted to paint that picture of why she might have gotten in a car, maybe, if she got in voluntarily, which we've talked about in the past, that there was no indication that she was in distress when she left. So, someone who's used to getting rides from friends that, and her other friends hadn't shown up yet, that could have been part of it, or she could have been in distress and we don't know. So I talk about the good kid crowd and the party crowd. And one of the things that I've learned a lot about Julie is she had friends sort of in every group. And we are, so I just saw Sharon Brown asked if John Walsh could do this story. We'd love to get her name out there. One of the things that I think about is every time we do something like this and we get people participating and involved and we say her name, I feel like there's traction that can be gained from that. So they've done some shows. I've actually seen some more things, other podcasts pop up with her story. So it is getting out there sort of a little bit more mainstream. And I think everyone's aware of the Paula Zahn show, but if you're not, that had probably the best details that we've seen so far. So that's pretty cool. But so Julie really interacted with all kinds of kids, from sort of the the athletes and the sort of more preppy kids, the good students. She liked to go out and party and have fun, and she having her own phone line gave her a little bit of access to people without her mom knowing. So she had her own channels of things. And when I was going through this and talking to people, I talked to people from both sides of her life, and that was kind of interesting from the perspective of how they knew Julie and what they could say about her life at the time. I'm very particularly interested in her life outside of school and work, but some of those people were involved in both of those. So I just want to start by saying this is something I hope, as you go through this and think about this and think about who she might have known and who she might have been dealing with, that there's a very different experience that men have with other men than what women have with men. There are men that are, comfortable, that women feel safe around, and there are men that they just inherently feel danger around. And the men who hang out with those dangerous men don't necessarily recognize that those men are dangerous to women. But if you ask them, if you think about it, okay, but would you want that guy to date your sister, your daughter? Then you're like, oh no, actually, that guy does this and this and this. And they'll start to think about things that might have been more aggressive about that guy, things that might have been controlling or disregarding of a female. And so, a crime like this is almost definitely perpetrated by a man. And the reasons behind it can be a couple of different things. But the number one thing is this man has a dominant control over a female. So you have to think about this differently. And so I'm asking the men who are watching to step outside their own shoes. Because, yeah, of course that dude is cool with you. But do women feel safe around him? And would you let your daughter date, this person if or your, sister or something? So I just wanted to say that because I want to unglue guys from how they perceive each other from their point of view. And I think that most women I know would agree with me. And I definitely encourage you to speak up if you, have experienced that. So let's talk a little bit about the weeks preceding her death. We have some highs and lows, things that may be unrelated, things that may be related, and I'm going to talk about each of those. Some of my short list here is that Julie was involved in a fight at a bowling alley. It's been, affirmed by people who were there. They do feel it was unrelated and just sort of a little, girl versus girl issue that really didn't carry over into anything serious. But that happened within a couple of weeks prior to her death. We had an anonymous report of Julie crying at a friend's house about being scared. We do believe that it was related to the credit card fraud at the time based on what the source stated. But I don't even know who this source is. It's sort of it's information I was given anonymously. But that's an interesting detail because I don't have anyone else saying that. And in fact, everyone else said she seemed pretty unconcerned. So I'm looking for people who would know if she had expressed any fear or concern related to credit card fraud or some other trouble that she was finding herself in or worried about. If someone has information like that, this isn't truly verifiable information. As I mentioned at the beginning, there might be things that we were told that we don't know why or who, in this case, who witnessed this. And, that's a detail that would be very important. And so if you were aware of something like that she was scared of, that would be important. We do think that if there was a related thing with the credit card fraud, that it could be connected to her workplace. Maybe she was afraid of getting in trouble. I have talked to 2 managers that worked with her, and neither one was aware of a credit card fraud issue going on at the time that they recalled, but this is 29 years later. So those are, that's information that would be really important to know. But the fact that she was crying and scared about it definitely resonates with me that somebody knows. The friend's house that she was at is deceased at this time. So we don't have that particular friend, but we do know who it was. And I'm not sharing their name, whose house it was. I'm not sharing their name out of respect for them and because I don't have any verification of it. We do know, this actually just came in, that not the weekend prior, but the weekend before that, probably within, I guess it was within 10 days, more like 8 days of her death, she was seen at an underage club in College Park, hanging out with her friends, seemed to be having fun, seemed unconcerned, not scared. That would have been Ground Zero. So if you've been to Ground Zero with her very shortly before her death, we'd love to hear from you. If there's anything going on, any interactions, guys showing interest that we don't know about yet, those are things that are really, really important. We do think that Julie was a very attractive young woman and that she had a lot of men who were interested in her. And so when she was out, if there was someone who was giving her extra attention or anything like that, we would love to know. Even if it was someone she wouldn't have considered dating, or just friends with, she doesn't have to reciprocate it, or maybe she does reciprocate it. I've talked to a couple of different guys who had close friendships with her. She did not have a boyfriend at the time, but she had, some boys she was getting to know, and each one of them has been very forthcoming and open and supportive of us pursuing answers in this case. So that's really good. And we know that one of those boys she had a movie night with the Wednesday prior to her death. They watched The Lion King at her place. This particular boy was not someone who hung out around here. One of the things I mentioned before is Julie's life was very compartmentalized. So she would have friends from this walk of life and this walk of life and this walk of life. So that was somebody who was in sort of a separate walk of life and didn't really know any of her other people. But she seemed to take time for all the different people in her life. And that was one of the unique things. I know for instance, she had a dinner date planned for the night after she died. And that was with a guy friend that went to our high school, Eleanor Roosevelt. So she sort of had a very active social life. We also, we know that she went to a friend's house the weekend before, a matter of days before, and hung out with a few people. I've just gotten information on some of the people who were there, so I'm hoping to talk to them. But the feedback from that night was that there was nothing she was concerned about. She was cheerful, having a good time, being social. So those were all things that were pretty important, but it's good feedback to have. Julie wasn't hiding from anything. She was out in the world. She was meeting up with people. But we also have this one piece of information that she was scared. And it's sort of weird because it's such a left turn from everything else. So if there's something that about her being scared, or if you just know who she was hanging out with, and you remember any details, places you might have been with her. Were you at the bowling alley that night? Were you at Ground Zero with her? Were you at a friend's house with her in the week or so before she died? I would love to talk to you, find out a little bit more about what she was doing, who she was hanging out with. We've talked about, who she might have been buying weed from, because we know she had 3 blunts with her that night. And so she had a source for buying drugs, and so we know that there's other people that she's interacting with outside of just the people, that I'm describing here in this list of people. And we don't have a whole lot of information on that. But if you know anything, that would be good. One of the things I want to go into, a lot of people who knew Julie are aware that she went on, I know that she went out for ice cream with somebody who most people are aware of. And I'm sort of pulling back from naming names just out of respect for privacy. but I was told the story directly from the person who took her. And basically, she was not supposed to be going out with him. He took a friend's car, drove it to where she was to pick her up because he was basically taking over from the friend to pick up Julie. And, you know, I guess in some weird way inserted himself into that moment with her. And she accepted the ride, and she did know who he was, but he wasn't someone she knew well. And we've talked about getting in the car with someone you don't know well. And with that, he was going to be driving her home, but took the time to stop and get ice cream. And with the ice cream, I don't know if she wanted to go or was happy to get the ice cream or went along with it. But in his own words, he, after that time that he took her out, he did hear that she was, you know, talking shit about him or saying something negative about him, and he didn't like it. But he indicated for himself that that was no big deal. Again, that doesn't mean that was no big deal, just means that's what I was told. Um, I'm sure it didn't feel good, and it wouldn't feel good, but that was the story that we were given about it. And we know that Julie definitely expressed that she wasn't interested in that person. And we don't know if that person carried feelings about that, but you know, we know that it's one of um, the things we've considered is it somebody who felt jilted by her, and it doesn't have to be that person. There could be somebody else that expressed interest in her, or maybe never even expressed interest, but had interest, and you know, tried to took their shot that night, and it didn't go well. So those are just things to consider if you know anyone who had expressed interest to Julie, or anything that she had said to you about a guy showing interest to her. We'd love to hear about it. Um, this is something that is a little bit more in depth. The um, with several people, um, you know, have talked about the credit card fraud thing, and we don't know for sure if that's related, but it was indicated by a source that I spoke with. And the source is not necessarily reliable. I want to clear that up right away. They said that Julie opened her mouth. Well, they specifically said she opened her big mouth. I don't want to write that because it's just no. But that this happened about a week or two prior to her death, that she said or did something that put her in danger. They said that they said that they actually that there was other people who were aware of this, and that there are other people who know what happened and know that she did this. I don't know anything about this. Again, this doesn't jive with anything that some of the closest people to her have said. But again, Julie had sort of compartmentalized experiences and people that she was connected to. I don't know what she said or did, but that's something that could relate to the things she was scared about. And we definitely would love to talk to anyone who had any other indications that something wasn't right leading up to her death. We don't know, again, that this is a reliable source, but this was something that was told to me and seemed kind of alarming. I mean, it would, you know, would love to get to the bottom of that. If anyone knows, Cornelia said, same incident as the ice cream date. I was given the impression that she opened her mouth relating to something like the credit card fraud thing, but I don't know for sure because of the source that told me. But that person was fairly adamant about their story. But again, that does not make their story reliable. makes it clear that they want me to believe them. That's the only thing I know. And it makes me uncomfortable in a way because, you know, I've talked to some of the people who were there to pick her up that night and, found her missing. Um, and they are like super duper duper close to Julie. And they're like, no, we didn't know of anything. So it's weird to me that she would be um, crying at someone else's house or doing something that she wouldn't have told them, especially when they weren't like, they were, part of her party crowd. They weren't people that she had to hide stuff like that from, you would think. And they certainly had no reason to think she was going through anything like that or she was in danger. But so that's a question. To have someone say people did know what happened was interesting to me because I've always felt like somebody does know. And, it's been 29 years. We're in different places. And, I think it's really important to reevaluate who you are, what you stand for if you do know something. And even if it's a detail, even if you don't know everything, but you have a detail that you're like, there could be something there and I don't know. You don't know what piece of the puzzle is important. So I really, really encourage you to take a deep look into your heart and say, what would I do? This was, a 17-year-old girl. So please do consider that if you know something at all. Another thing that we had been told was that she was receiving prank calls from somebody that was saying their name was Habib. And of course, she knew it was prank calls. And that was something that just was never really resolved. We believe it was going to her private line at home. But she was also receiving late night calls, according to her mother. And, those could be as innocent as a friend just calling her late at night. And, again, this comes down to if you were interacting with Julie in the weeks prior to her death, and you can kind of give us one more kind of check mark in her timeline of, I talked to her on the phone. Yeah, I was at her house. Even if you're the one that did the prank call, I don't know how many people can say they didn't do a prank call back in our day because we didn't have that much to do. But, so that doesn't make anyone bad, but it would just definitely it would help us to know, okay, that person came forward and they said, yeah, we were being big dummies and we were joking around with her, would love to know that because it's just a little detail that, that would be nice to clear up and have that question mark sort of, answered. So if you know anything about that, please get in touch. We do not think that the people prank calling her were necessarily in any way related to the crime itself. It's just maybe weird timing because she did have a lot of things going on in her life. So we talked about the credit card theory a little bit earlier. We've talked about it in previous podcasts. As I mentioned, her closest friends knew nothing of any involvement, and the store manager said there was no reports. For most people, Julie showed no signs of fear or concern. There's multiple people that said Julie wouldn't get involved in something like that, which could be why she's in trouble. Could she have reported somebody? We don't know that. So while it's sitting out there as this could be related, a lot of people were involved in the credit card, theft back then. A lot of people. And it was kind of rampant. And I don't know that anyone would kill over it, but, I also don't know. We don't know that the person who picked her up was intending to kill her when they first picked her up. So, maybe something got out of hand. But if you do know something about the whole credit card fraud thing, it would be so, so, so nice to hear from you. If you knew something about her involvement in it or, you knew she wasn't involved in it. If you knew who was involved in it, we do know a number of people who were, but that doesn't necessarily mean much. But there have been, the police have definitely explored avenues that are related to people who were involved in the credit card fraud, scam, theft, whatever you would call it. They called it chicken wings, which is, just so stupid, but that's what it was known as. And so if you have any familiarity with that, it would be great to hear from you. I'm assuming that if people knew, if it was related to that and people knew who did it, then they might be people who were involved in that whole thing. So that's just what I'm putting out there. We know on the day of that she went missing, which, by the way, it's about 5 weeks from the 29th anniversary of her death. And the Justice for Julie group is planning on doing something for her 30th anniversary. So that's a long time away, but just wanted to mention that really fast. And on the day of, she got a ride to work with 3 friends. We know that she had purchased 3 blunts, gave one to one of those friends that drove her to work, and still had 2 in her possession at the time that she went to work. We have never found those. Nobody found those at the time. So is it possible that the people who picked her up took those from her? That's a real possibility. So that exists. And when she was at work, she was happy. There was a friend, the same person who had a date with her the next day. That friend basically briefly talked to her, but said everything was normal. She seemed happy. All was good. So again, it wasn't like she was expecting anything bad to happen to her at that time. And, we've talked to the people who drove her to work, and they're pretty forthcoming and would also like to see, whoever did this to Julie get caught. So, and that's another thing that to share is that there's a lot of people coming forward, and you would definitely not be alone if you had something to share. You don't have to come to me. You definitely can go to the police, Detective Bernie Nelson. He is awesome, and he's been very cool, cooperative with me. Bernie's been great and willing to communicate with me when I provide information that I find. And probably 90% of it isn't really very useful, but we're trying to stitch together the things that are useful, and I never want to presume that I know what is or isn't useful, or that might resonate with the detectives. So you can reach out to the police directly, and I believe we have shared their contact information on the Justice for Julie page, and I know we can share that again anytime, so we can do that soon. So at work, nothing really out of the ordinary happened. We know that she walked with a manager and a coworker over to the liquor store. We knew that she bought a beverage from the store, and she sits on the planter right outside the store. We're talking a matter of feet away, just not that far. The manager checks to make sure she's okay, and when she leaves, she makes a mental note of people hanging in the parking lot by a red Jetta, or I should say by a car that appeared to be a red Jetta, fit the description of. And I've talked to that manager. She specifically said that Julie, confirmed that she was fine waiting. So again, no indication that she was afraid of anything. While it's not clear when the other coworker left, we believe she left somewhere around that time or shortly after. And then Julie was there alone until Julie was seen talking to people that were in a car that the witness believed was a red Jetta. And she was last seen at 9:50, and the car door was ajar. So that person who last saw her, I've spoken to them, and they walked in, and when they came back out, she was gone, and it was pretty fast. So it was within a matter of minutes, and her friends, showed up just before 10. So that was a very short window. Um, this is an important question. This is one of my number one reasons why I wanted to do this is I would love for people to share when they found out and how they found out. If you knew that she was missing the night before, I would love to know that. If you found out the next day, love to know your story just because, it puts into perspective like when, especially with the people who might have known something the night before, who they talked to, who they were around. It was a school night. Most people might have been at home. But still, if there was sort of I called this person, they called that person, we can find out who knew, what they might have talked about, thought about, where she, did they have any ideas of where she would have gone? So I'd love to hear when you knew. And I'm just saying hello. Please feel free to share. Um, so I, that's so funny. So the reason I ask that is because I think it puts a perspective on the timing for people and who would have, um, maybe they remember talking to a friend or family member and they remember specific details about what they heard that night. So that's something that would be really cool to sort of get a picture of who knew the night before, how people found out the next day. I know some people who I've talked to found out just watching the news or listening to the radio. Some people found out in school that day. Um, so just please share that with me if you can, or you can put it in the chat or message the Justice for Julie page with any details you remember from that night or that morning. So we talked a little bit about the people that the manager saw in the parking lot. I share their description every time, so I'm sharing it this time, again in hopes that it resonates with somebody. There were 2 black males and 1 black female, and one was around 6 feet tall and slim, dark skin tone, um, as a black male, a dark skinned black male, who was very well groomed and clean shaven with a multicolored silk shirt. Female who was 5'9", short hair, jeans, and a baggy jacket. Oh, and white sneakers. Didn't get on the slide, but and the second male was a very, very light-skinned black male. That's how it was described to me from the police and from the witness. And the reason she picked up on them there is because they were kind of hanging out there in the parking lot, 2 cars back from the liquor store when she was leaving, and the very well-groomed, clean-shaven male asked her if she wanted weed. So we're assuming that person was selling weed. And so I want, people to think about, who Julie knew that fit those descriptions. If indeed it's true from other sources that it was someone she knew, who Julie would hang around. I know her friendships were compartmentalized, her relationships were. So we want to really focus on these descriptions because the same car with people in it was seen talking to her moments later, and that was when she was last seen. So in that same description of car was seen where her body was dumped. So this is vital information, and I'll always bring it up because, if there's a relationship to Julie in any way, somebody knows who these descriptions are. We've had people come forward with some information. of who they think it is. And I'd like you to go back to the message at the beginning for the men who watch. I really want you to be thinking differently. I want you to be thinking about not who was cool with you, but who were they safe? Were women safe around them? Because that's the type of person we're looking for, is someone who may be a little bit likely to pop off on a woman. And that's kind of how we see it. There are suspects in this case that have been named that are sort of the known boogeyman. They're the one that, everyone associates with this. But that person isn't described as being seen in the parking lot. That doesn't mean they didn't become involved in some way. We don't know anything. But what we do know is these descriptions here, and that sometimes a person who's dangerous doesn't walk around looking dangerous to everybody, or they are pretty good at managing other people's perception of them, depending on if they want you to perceive them as chill and cool. And, behind closed doors, they could be a monster. And I hate to say it, but as a woman who's, seen it, they can literally go from Jekyll and Hyde, and the men in their lives will never see them behave that way towards a woman. Sometimes they will. I think some men, it depends on who they're comfortable around, or how comfortable they are with, who they're abusing. So those are just things to think about when you're thinking about these descriptions and who knew Julie and who she might have been interacting with. And so we definitely would like anyone who has information on that to reach out to the police. You can talk to me. That's totally up to you what you want to do. But so I want to talk again about the car, because we've had 2 different people come forward with cars that they think could have been involved. And so we had one anonymous source say that there was a community car, basically a car that they all seem to have access to. And they said that it was a red Jetta and it had a loud sound system and shag carpets. So that's a pretty memorable car, but apparently multiple people drove it. If you have any familiarity with this car, if you think about, maybe you didn't remember what kind of car it was, but you remember a car having shag carpets, come talk to me. We're trying to find out who might have owned the car. We just know that people were using it. And keeping in mind, I do know who the source is. I can't say 100% that they're reliable in their information, or that it was definitely a Jetta or a car that looked like a Jetta. So if that sounds familiar to you, you don't have to remember the exact make and model, but if it kind of looked like a Jetta, there you have it. So another source said that there was also a red Nissan Sentra. It was sort of maybe a early 80s model that was owned by somebody's mom and was regularly used by people in town, in that friend group, and in their friend group, which looked identical to a Jetta. And just case in point, the picture in that top right corner, I don't know if that's a Jetta or a Nissan, but I can tell you that it's a Nissan. But it looks a lot like a red Jetta of the time. So we've done that before, little comparisons. The Nissan Sentra also, I think, can be cross-referenced with the Datsun. So you might know it as a Datsun. So those are just things to note. And the answer is yes, it could look like a Jetta. It's one of the things that detective shared it. Okay, so one of the things that was mentioned here is that the detectives felt that it was at least 2 people involved, and just because of the nature of everything. So, again, you have this group of people seen, this car that was seen. This is a very important, piece of information. So, please, if either of those cars sound familiar or there's something else that you remember, please reach out. It may or may not be the right car, but if anything we can do to trace a car that might fit that description would be really helpful. The other thing is we've talked some about the path that the car might have taken. When I did a Google map, I came up with the most direct route from the Greenway Shopping Center, which is indicated by the red star on the far left, was to go up on Greenbelt Road, which is 193, all the way around to Daisy Lane, which is the star all the way to the right. The middle star, just above the blue line, indicates where Julie would have lived at the time. It's actually a very walkable distance, but at night, again, I mentioned her mom didn't want her to walk, so she was just waiting there. We do know that the store closed at 9, and she was last seen there at 9:50. And it's very possible that someone convinced her that they were going to drive her home, and then they didn't. We do know that her friends passed by the Greenway Shopping Center shortly before she would have disappeared, and the lights to the store were off, so they thought maybe she'd already gone home, so they went to her place first. But nowhere in their drive or when they went to her place or back to Greenway did they see anything suspicious. It was only when they showed up and saw her things on the curb and Julie was missing that, so I just want to share this comment. Curious about the shag carpeting in a car. I think it was somebody probably was trying to pimp that car out. We've had descriptions say that the car had a spoiler on the back too, which I don't think is something that's normally on a Jetta or similar car. So when you hear that description, the loud music, the subwoofer type of thing, and the shag carpets and all that, and the spoiler. And I don't know if this car had a spoiler, but I know the car at the scene of the crime had a spoiler. You kind of imagine someone, kind of making a pimp mobile. Maybe with a budget, but still. So that was just something that was described to us, and the person remembered it very distinctively. And they mentioned that multiple people were driving it at various times, so they would have all had access to it in some form or fashion. With this map, that's the most direct route, but we also know that she was missing from about just before 10 o'clock to when we know her body was dumped around midnight over at Daisy Lane, even though it wasn't officially found until about 5:30 a.m. So what happened between 10 and 12 is still a mystery. We've also talked about the route. We've talked about how there's arrows, the red arrows indicate other routes, going down to the right on Hanover and up on Good Luck Road could take you that way, or going up on the BW Parkway and through Beaver Dam Road, over to Lanham Severn and then over to Good Luck. So I'm sorry, over to Daisy Lane. So there's multiple paths they could have taken. We just know that her friends didn't notice anything suspicious on the roads when they were coming back from her place, and they would have been driving on Greenbelt Road. I don't know if their timing would have caused them to cross paths. And even if they did cross paths with somebody, they may have not recognized that there was a problem. But we also don't know when Julie knew she was in danger. We don't know if she got in the car and was fine for a little bit until they didn't take her where she was expecting to go or didn't let her out when she was expecting to get out. So we don't know at what moment she knew that her life was in danger and she needed to escape. We've talked about this before, that she didn't scream or do anything that any witnesses around heard, and they should have heard her if there was any commotion because they were right there. I mean, if you go and stand on that curb, the door is like 5 feet away. And the parking lot was busy. Somebody would have heard a scream and would have, or some kind of commotion if she had fought or avoided. And again, at 9:50, when she was seen talking to the people in the car, she was leaning down towards the car, didn't seem to have any mannerisms that would have caused the witness to be alarmed by the situation. They walked by thinking it was normal, no big deal. So I don't think that she thought she was in danger at the time. So that's something that, is important, of a detail that we've discussed. And, there's these people sort of saying, yeah, somebody knew something, she was talking to these people, she didn't put up a fight, so the best leads we have are that it's somebody she knew. And the best leads we have are that description that I shared. So please reach out if that sounds familiar to you at all in any way. And so this goes back to what I mentioned before, which was, did you know Julie was missing the night before? I do know a couple of people who did, and it was a very long night for them. I know that, it's hard to remember back and remember exactly who you might have talked to when you found out. I know people who found out the next morning after she was already dead before they even went to school. So we know it was on the news fairly early. And, one of the big questions is, if you did know, were you somebody who got involved in trying to find her? Did you call around to people? Did you go out and try to find her? Again, it was a school night and not everyone in her age group had access to cars. So we don't know if people went and looked or if they said, hey, we don't know where Julie is. Have you seen her? We know the mom showed up Julie's mom showed up very quickly and was involved. We know that the police questioned her manager that early morning, right after, actually it was right before her body was found. And that's when they got the description of the 3 people that were seen there. So there's all this information, that we don't have fully yet, and stitching it together, finding out when people first learned of it, and trying to piece together that puzzle of, would Julie have known she was in danger from the get-go? Was she in danger in the weeks leading up to it that she knew of? I don't know that she was. It's weird that we have a couple of people saying these, and then everyone who was really close to her, they weren't saying that. They didn't know of that. So Sarah asked, so those descriptions came before they even found her? Yes, they did. They came around 4:00 in the morning. And this is actually sort of a frustrating point because she would have been dead by then, but so that wouldn't have saved anything. But that person was interviewed, that manager was interviewed between 4 and 5 in the morning. She was found around 5:30. But there was no reaction to that at the time. And that's the only time that they interviewed that manager. So could they have found out more details? Could they have said, hey, let's try to, recreate this, or get an artist sketch of their face or something, but there was no revisiting to that information. But they also might not have had all the details together on, until a little later in the day, that Julie would have been seen talking to people in the same type of car. That the interesting point about that is the Greenbelt police were the ones that immediately went to the scene of the crime. But when her body was found outside of the Greenbelt jurisdiction, it was handed over to the county. And I don't know if there was some issue where that information didn't get connected. The first time they really went in on the description of those people was actually 5 years after her death. And that's one of the reasons why I always share it, because I feel like there's so many people who never got that information at the time. And I wonder if we had been able to post that at the time, would people have been thinking about the right people, and would they have said something? If it's somebody Julie knew who fit that description, or could have known because they were in the same circle. Those details are so important. Um, and So we have a comment. A red car wasn't even mentioned until a week or two into April. That's actually a very good point too. Uh, I can't imagine what it's like in a situation like this to be a homicide detective and trying to piece together all these puzzles and try to figure out, based on the triangulation of all these different witness statements, that here's the picture being painted. We have the benefit of, you know, a whole big picture of time and seeing it all put together. But I was actually pretty shocked. I didn't see the description until, I want to say, like 20 years after she died. I didn't read the 2005. And when they had the 20-year reunion, it brought it to my attention. And that's, when I saw that and I thought, oh, wow, that's information that was just sitting out there. And I don't think that they hammered it home. But also, if they had posted it in 2000, that information might not have made it to half of us who had moved to other areas, or wouldn't have seen it. And it probably didn't get a whole lot of press. It just was like, hey, here's a new article to read. Maybe it was on the news for a short blip. Yes. So going on to the next thing, I mentioned there's important details, and I've talked about this. The parties or events she attended, who was she hanging out with, who was she talking to, did anyone show interest that you know of, who did she get her drugs from, all that stuff is important. And there might even be details that you have no reason to think are important, but they can maybe help paint the picture. So if you have any information and you want to share it, or just talk about it, to somebody, you can talk to Justice for Julie, you can reach out to the police, whatever it is that you're most comfortable with. One thing I want to dive into a little bit is, oh, you got a comment here. Why mess up a nice car like that on purpose, unless it was going to be used in a planned crime? So when I say community car, that's probably a nice way of saying kind of like what would they call it? Like when you have a cell phone that's like a hidden cell phone or something. It's a car that they did use for crimes because, it wasn't their own car. And, but maybe it was more often used for drugs. And we don't know that this car was used in this crime. We don't have that, that would be a stretch for us to know for sure. We just know that up until we started doing these podcasts, there was no information on any Jetta or Jetta-like car at all. And now we have two different witnesses with two different cars that could have potentially been involved because they were being driven by people that knew Julie. So those are just pieces of information that may or may not fit into the puzzle. But it's worth sharing to bring it to your attention. So Julie mentioned that perhaps part of the strategy was not tipping off the driver of the red car. And, again, I can't even begin to fathom what a homicide detective would have to think about in order to investigate a crime and do it in such a way that they manage the flow of information so they could be sure that they get the right people and, maybe catch someone off guard. I do think because so much time has gone by and for a long time there wasn't a whole lot of traction, I do think that they're more willing to share information, and I'm careful about what I share, because, people, they don't want to be named here and things like that. So the one good question is the shag carpet aftermarket. It would have been, yes. It would not have been a car, a the typical car carpet. In fact, it makes absolutely zero sense. It probably would have gotten completely crusty pretty fast. Although had they found that car and it was involved in the crime, it might have been great for holding evidence. The status, with the investigation is that there is still activity. We've mentioned this every time. The police have been really responsive and helpful. And, I want to thank Detective Bernie because he actually is, pretty cool, tolerates a lot of, my communication and other people's. And I do think he has, an interest in, solving this case, and they have made moves with DNA and things like that. So there's activity happening. We've sort of slowed down the podcast just because we are looking at, kind of just sometimes it just takes time and patience. But like I said, there's still a lot of things that are happening, and we're collecting information, and that's where you guys come in. That's why I'm doing this today, just to remind you we're still here. And I think I want to come out into the light with this a little bit. I think that when this happened, one of the overwhelming insights that I get is it scared so many people, that there was so much, fear. Some people didn't feel the fear the same way, but a lot of people felt fearful that if it was someone they knew, that was just very scary. The fact that it could happen to someone they know, it makes it very scary. I think any time that you're coming and speaking out, you're basically potentially confronting someone who was willing to murder someone. You're putting it on blast. But I'm doing this because I don't want people to be afraid anymore, and I want us to rally together around, this goal of getting justice for Julie. Carrie's asking, has DNA been ran yet? We just know that the DNA is at the lab. That's all we know. There's all, it's always a timing issue with all these cases, new cases. And I think cold cases are kind of weird because as much as they do want to solve them and they're always actively working on them, it's they have to believe that there's something that can be we do think that, we have that interest from the police, that there's something there to look for. But we also have to have kind of patience because there's so many new cases coming in where it's a hot lead, a fresh lead. They just had a murder of a 2-year-old in PG County. And I know the detectives really put their effort into those things for those immediate crimes. And as much as you'd love for there to be that dedication to the older cases, it's just all filtered in, and there can be rush orders on some things that may not get, ours may not get the rush the same way, But I think that if there was, momentum in the case and things that they could, move forward on, that there might be more of a reason to push things forward, like the DNA. And that's why the information that we are getting from people it's so important. And it's Sarah said people thought she had been beaten or raped, which means people have been imagining it was like a serial killer or someone they wouldn't know. Yes, so we've addressed this some in previous podcasts, but the police have said very clearly that there was no signs of sexual assault. That doesn't mean there wasn't some component. We don't know, but we know that there was no signs of sexual assault, nothing that led them to believe that the person's intent was to sexually assault Julie. There was no major signs of beating. There was some injuries associated with the crime being committed, but it wasn't like a savage beating. according to police. There are people who've said that she had injuries when she was in an open casket coffin, and that's one of those things where it's hard to know, but that is multiple people have said that they did see injuries, but the police have indicated that some of those injuries could have been they believe were happened when she was pulled out of the car and dragged onto the pavement and maybe hit the ground. Um, and there might have been some bruising because her hands were tied behind her back. Um, and, obviously she was strangled, so there would have been bruising on her neck. Um, you know, but it wasn't like someone just, there wasn't a sign of a massive fight or beating. There wasn't a rape. And I think that does change the MO a little bit. And uh, the police have always sort of visualized this lone white male serial killer because that's sort of, unfortunately, a demographic that fits. But it doesn't fit the description of the people that were seen there that night. And we don't know that we that's the only thing we have to go on that we know was an eyewitness statement from that night. That doesn't mean, that's um, um, the only possible outcome or thing, those are the only people who could have been involved. It just means that that just means we have a lot of people that are, I'm being told to be a little quieter, sorry. That we have a lot of people that uh, maybe had the wrong impression of what happened, and we're just hoping that by sharing the information, that it makes people think differently. Um, I think that you know it's been over an hour, and I'm gonna hop off, but my overwhelming theme here is I'd love to know when you found out about Julie missing or dead. Which one was it? The night before, the morning of? How did you find out? Who were you with? Who did you talk to? That would be really helpful for anyone who can reach out. The other, thing obviously is if you were aware of Julie being scared of anything. We've heard a lot about her being kind of carefree and happy and chilling and partying and not particularly hiding from anybody or anything. So it's hard to imagine that she was scared um, from someone in particular that she knew was out to get her. But could she have been scared that she was going to get in trouble at work for doing something she shouldn't have done? She, even though she liked to party and hang out with that crowd, she wasn't sort of the type to get heavily involved in any kind of real crime, So she might have felt pressured to. Those are all things to really think about. We have one question here. Would it be advisable for you to start a GoFundMe page offering a reward? There is actually a reward for information. I believe it's at 25,000. In this case, I think that's been around a long time. There's I can't remember the information, but there's a sort of a place where you can report that information. However, it's still best to go directly to police and tell them, and they'll direct you on how you can collect a reward. We have found that sometimes when you go to those tip lines, they don't always make it to the police, and sometimes it's harder to sort of show urgency in that situation. Um, and so Julie Epstein, who was a good friend of hers, said I could see her being annoyed or mad at someone for bringing BS to her work and potentially getting her in trouble, but she's not sure she could see her crying like that. It's that particular piece of information has sat out there for a while, and I haven't shared it because I don't know the person who shared it, and I don't know what they saw. And I wish I could ask 1,000 questions because it's so different than any other feedback that we're getting, and it might provide some really important insight. Um, but that's all I have so far on that, and hopefully I'll find out more. Hopefully someone will reach out and talk to me about what they knew. But I can say that I've spoken to both of her managers, and neither one of them thought she was in any trouble at work whatsoever. And so we don't have any reason to think that she was doing anything that she was caught for, anyways. Maybe she was afraid she would get caught, but that doesn't seem like it would motivate somebody to murder her. So, uh, Justice for Julie Page said that 25K is a pretty substantial amount compared to some other cases, most, the typical cases. Cornelius asked if she did well in school. She'd been scared of bad grades. I don't think so. I think she was generally a good student. I don't know if she was like a straight A type of student, but I don't think that that was something that anyone was worried about. That she was going to school, she was going to work, she was a reliable student, a reliable employee. I've talked to people who were in classes with her, and I don't think that there was anything on that front that she would be scared about. I do think that it was related to it. If what I was told is true, it was related to the credit card thing. That's what I was told. I just don't know in what capacity. I don't know what her involvement was, and I don't know why she trusted sharing it with those people and not some of her closest friends. So those are things I just don't know yet. That's why I want to put that out there and see if anyone recalls her being scared about anything. And because she was a good person, maybe she was scared about something that to somebody else wouldn't have been that big of a deal. I have no way of knowing, but please, please, please come forward, and if you know something. So I think we're good to go. I hope that what I shared helps somebody. I try not to go back through every detail of the case every single time, because there's a lot of details in the case. Feel free to watch other podcasts. They do kind of, you have to have a little bit of patience. I don't even think I can watch my own stuff back. But I genuinely appreciate the people who take the time to watch these and ask questions and share information. I actually just talked to some people today that had reached out from a previous podcast and got a few more people to talk to. I'm excited for that. So it does make a difference. It is helping. And somewhere in there, laced in all the things that she was doing and people she knew, are the answers. If that description of the people seen resonates with you at all, here, I'll just put that back up. Why not? If that resonates, let's see. If that resonates with you at all, then please reach out to the police and don't. I'm encouraging people not to be afraid. There's strength in numbers, and if we're all step up, who's going to play whack-a-mole on the situation, So, and there's a lot of people who've stepped up, not just to me, but to the police and across the board. So I really appreciate everyone who has put themselves out there, stuck their necks out for Julie. She deserves it. And, take the time to think about when you last talked to her, what you last did with her, and keep her in your thoughts as you kind of hash through what life was like during that time. Maybe something comes up. Thank you very much and take care. Bye.